You know, last year I came up here probably just about 4 weeks after the seat was going to open up, and I asked for your help. Today I'm back to say thank you. It worked. To Sean McGarvey, who has been there during the election process, but more importantly, what has happened since. I'll touch base on that in a moment. To all the general presidents and to my president, Ed Hill. The resumes for most of the people in Congress aren't like us. But what is particularly important is when you hear the talk of diversity, and there might be a certain mindset that comes in. Diversity also comes in where your background is, what you did. The election was November 6th. All through the election, as I had for the last 15 years, I was a business agent and assistant business manager of IBW Local 351 with Ed Gant. Day in and day out, you know what it's like. It's about getting jobs. And that was the focus I was going to take to Washington from the day that I announced. You know, in New Jersey, we do it a little different. Our Senate President, Steve Sweeney, and I went to high school together, and I had the honor of serving with him as the Assistant Majority Leader. We got an iron worker who's the Senate President and is going to be the next governor of the state of New Jersey. Had Sean mentioned that we need more friends? Absolutely. You know, I had 6 days from the election. It was a special election, so I got sworn in immediately. And obviously, it changed my life upside down. Because in Congress, you can have unlimited amount of unearned income. We ain't doing that. So I had to, at the end of November, resign and retire from the IBW, which was very difficult for me to do because that has been my life. But it just took me a short bit of time to say, I'm just not going to the office every day. Those values, those thoughts, whether it's the IBW or all the building trades, is always going to be there. You don't forget where you come from, and I certainly won't. We showed up, and you can imagine, they usually give you 60 days to learn the job. I had 6. They give you a card, put your picture on there, some computer code. So 3 days after I was sworn in, Keystone Pipeline vote's coming up. Okay, listen, you want to give people the courtesy. They knew where I was. I talked about it. This is about jobs. You know, for those of you who are my age or about, anybody remember those odd even days, right, for getting gasoline? What a pain in the neck that was? Where your best friend was the guy who ran the gas station. You had a set of plates. I didn't do that, but we didn't have cameras that took pictures back then. We had Polaroids. It was great. So we went from that mindset of where my next tank of gas was going to now being the largest energy producer in the world. That's remarkable because that's going to drive the recovery and what we're going to do over the course of the next 25 years. You know, we remember that our foreign policy, everything we did was driven by we had to get the oil back over here. In my district, where we also, as the IBW covered, we had refineries up and down the Delaware River. Very good jobs, very good jobs. And they use the union trades. Takes a lot of skill sets to work in those conditions. So how did we get to where we were today? So I go down onto the floor of the House, and it's all brand new. And I voted because there was a procedural vote that happened first called motion to recommit. You don't need to know what it is. What you need to know is everybody came running over to me and yell at me that I wasn't allowed to do that. I didn't even have to think about it twice. You know, the actual merits against or for it were so far blown out, and that's probably one of the telling moments that I've come back here over the past 60 days. You know, it's all the spin meisters. I'm not a spin guy. You know, my 4 years that I spent was in an apprenticeship program. And the fact of the matter, whether it was running the AFL-CIO in South Jersey or doing the building trades, my job was to go out and recruit candidates. Started with a bricklayer named Joe Lorenzo out of Camden City. Wow, all of a sudden we're hearing policies that we like. Why? He was council president. Then a carpenter became a freeholder in New Jersey, a freeholder as a county commissioner. Then we got Steve involved. Now, my escort committee was probably most of New Jersey Legislative Assembly. Joe Egan out of 456, labor chair. Wayne D'Angelo out of 269, energy and telecommunications, big stuff. We have a carpenter, OE, electrician. Now, when you have a discussion, you're inside the room. What happens here in Washington, it's about longevity. The power that you gain, generally speaking, is the longer you're there with the seniority system. Well, that means that's further away from where your career was and those experiences. When they were talking about the Keystone Pipeline, and it really drove me up a wall, they're talking about these temporary jobs. Temporary jobs, that was my career, that was my life. You know what's a temporary job? This pin, it's called 2 years. That's a true temporary job. And because we heard of that, I had discussions with many of the people you see behind me. They don't understand what we do day in and day out. It came through on the multi-employer and pension plans. That is, you know, for those who aren't involved in it, it can be complicated. So we're going to do something a little different. We're going to start a building trades caucus in Congress to make sure our voice is heard. This is no disrespect for all my colleagues and friends in labor, but we're different. My first speech on the floor of the House was right after we're sworn in. There was a huge, huge bill called Cromnibus, and that many of the people behind me had been working on for literally years to fix the multi-employer pension plan. The good news is it passed. The bad news is it needs to be fixed, and we're going to get that done because we know how that important that is. That was George Miller, who literally on his way out the door was able to pull this off at the very last minute. We knew we had some problems with it, but we had to get it done. The cost of doing nothing was way too high. So we're going to do that, and then here was my first real labor vote. There was a bill to, the president wants to make the NLRB, bringing it up to our standards, where you can email things, you can release names, really, and the most important thing is to put a timeline from when you file till you get there. Stuff we do each day. I got to speak on the House floor, and right down, they call it the well, which is the bottom area. There's a desk that goes all the way around. It has about 7 different terms: liberty, prosperity. And then there's one that is really important. It says union. I'm going to do revisionist history. We're talking about our unions. And that reminded me, so I'm up there talking about saying, I think this is one of the most anti-American votes that you could take. Boy, you kicked them right in the, they didn't like that. Because somehow, you're the fault of our economy. It's okay that we're spending $56 billion to give a tax break, that estate tax or that death tax. By the way, anybody who gets hit by this, $10.6 million. How many people out there have an estate worth $10.6 million? There's only about 5,000 people in this country. They're the same people who stopped paying Social Security in January. They keep getting the breaks. We want the breaks for the working men and women. So whether it's Davis-Bacon, and by the way, the NLRB vote was interesting. Every Democrat in the House was on board, and we only had 3 Republicans. Frank Lobiondo, Chris Smith out of New Jersey, and Representative King out of New York. So you telling me we've come this far that there's no middle ground? Now that's the part that drives me nuts. I sit on the Budget Committee. Everything I hate about Washington happens there. They come out, they talk about the welfare moms. They're not talking about the most important thing, and that's about creating an economy that can drive jobs. They're blaming everything else. It's a bait and switch. You know, it doesn't take you 16 years to figure that out. We need allies, and we have some very good allies in both caucuses. But I need help. I told you what we did in New Jersey makes a difference. For those of you who are thinking to dip your toes into that water, you know, it wasn't in my long-range plan to be a representative in Congress. But I'll tell you what, once you get there, it's one of the most effective things that we can do each and every day, because our voice isn't always being heard out there. And if there's anything I want to drill home today, you know, I'm an electrician. I'm in the most deliberative body in the world. Nothing special. I don't have the big doctoral degrees. I'm an electrician. I'm a damn proud electrician. We need more people. We need carpenters, operating engineers, insulators. You can do it. So there's 2 things I touch base on. I was around in NAFTA in that fight. And unfortunately, we heard all the rhetoric, how many jobs there were going to help us. Drive around my district, I'll show you the empty buildings. You know, it's called fair trade, not free trade. And there's no way we're going to compete with 50 cents an hour. This is going to be a brutal fight, and I applaud the men and women who really put their foot down here, because somehow they're spinning this that we'll have labor protections, we'll have environmental protections. Nah, it's not going to work. President's pulling out all the stops, giving a lot of flights to folks on Air Force One, very impressive. In fact, I had the chance to go on it. I got to tell him that I'm not with him on this, right? I have a great deal of respect for the president. This is not good for us. Now, forgive me, it's good for a few of you. The owners who ship the jobs overseas, your coats, your jackets, your shoes that all used to be made here, they can get shipped out now. How many jobs went down to Mexico? So this is just another one in the line. And we're getting close. I'm really surprised on how far we're getting on this. I thought the president would be much further along. So I think there's hope that we're going to be able to stop this because, by the way, it's not just the employees who lose their job. It's your jobs also building these plants. You know, we need to take advantage of the energy we have, not what we want to ship out overseas. And last but not least, and the president has promised that he's going to take care of us on our health plans, what they call the Cadillac Plan or the Platinum. Myself and Representative Courtney, I think we're going to drop it this week or next week to repeal that. So this is real simple. $56 billion for 5,000 people, or something less than around 10 million or billion for working men and women. You tell me where the scales are. You need to make sure that this conversation continues. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. You need to knock on their doors, and that's the last thing I want to leave with you. We get hundreds, if not thousands, of emails, hundreds of letters, phone calls. It really is. The most effective thing you can do is when you're back in district, It's great to talk to them down here. When you hit them in their home district, it makes a significant difference because somehow you come back to Washington and it's insulated. Talk to your representative. It really works. They need to know that they're the men and women who live in your district who are going to be unemployed when this happens. I came here, as I started with last year, to ask for your help. I sit here humble and absolutely proud that obviously I represent the 1st District, but my heart is in the building trades. My heart is being an electrician, and I thank you for that. God bless.